8 seconds to 7 o'clock in the East. Polls closing as I speak in 5 states, and we're now ready for our first results in the Senate. We'll start with Kentucky. The Senate there, the race can be projected from the 7 p.m. poll closing. NBC News projects that Rand Paul, the ophthalmologist from Kentucky, is the projected winner for the Senate to replace the retiring Jim Bunning. In Indiana, Congressman Brad Ellsworth of the Blue Dog losing to Dan Coates, the projected winner. My NBC News, the former senator back in the saddle again in Indiana. No surprise in South Carolina, Jim DeMint is your projected winner. My NBC News over Alvin Green, who was still running. In Vermont, no surprise there. As expected, the veteran Pat Leahy holds on to his seat in a state that went 68-31 for Obama last time, solid D remaining. In the Georgia Senate race between Mr. Isaacson, the Republican, and Mr. Thurmond, the Democrat, this is too early to call. That is an actual interpretation. That is language, as opposed to suggesting it being too close to call, which is the other popular number. Too early to call, meaning we may have an idea of what's going on, but it's too early to say with any authority that it's going to hold that way. See the difference between leaning and we don't know. So here's what it looks like, the change in the Senate that we know about so far. Obviously a Republican pickup. One, Indiana. Indeed, the 7:30 Eastern Time poll closings, as represented by the wonderful map of North Carolina, Ohio, and West Virginia, 5 seconds hence. And we have some information, at least, if not necessarily calls, from the 3 key races there in the Senate in each of them. And starting in West Virginia, it is too early to call between Governor Joe Manchin and the Republican and Tea Party candidate John Racy. We are, again, too early to call. Ohio, not the case. To replace the retiring Senator Voinovich, NBC News projects Rob Portman, the former Bush budget director, will in fact take that seat and retain it for the Republicans. The North Carolina Senate race, Mr. Burr seeking another term in office there. This one is also too early to call, but Mr. Burr leads in that case. And from 7 o'clock still considered too early to close. At the 7 o'clock, too early to call, rather, from the 7 o'clock close between Senator Isaacson and the Democratic challenger Michael Thurmond. A few seconds before 8 o'clock Eastern Time, the polls closing at this hour in 15 more states. The results are going to come to you hot and heavy starting moments from now with the Florida Senate race, which NBC News can now project will go to the Republican and Tea Party candidate Marco Rubio. In a tight 3-way race, there's your projected winner, Mr. Rubio, who was leading in most of the late polls. Much discussion in the last weeks of this race, whether or not the Democrat Kendrick Meek would drop out and perhaps endorse the independent Charlie Crist. That now looking with those percentages, again, those are early percentages at about a quarter, third in, that looking to be something of an academic issue as Mr. Crist and Mr. Meek long behind Mr. Rubio there. To New Hampshire, the Senate race there, and Kelly Ayotte, also Palin, Tea Party, defeating the Congressman Paul Hodes in our NBC projections. That's New Hampshire. Delaware in a very prominent, but perhaps not a very close race. We don't have the hard numbers on it yet. The Democrat Chris Coons vaulted into a major lead after the upset by the Tea Party candidate Ms. O'Donnell, has now projected as the NBC News winner in Delaware. In Maryland, no surprise, Senator Mikulski, the incumbent Democrat, to be returned, according to our NBC News projections. The same for Alabama and the Republican Richard Shelby, who will return as the graphic pops up there. He is our projected winner in Alabama. In Oklahoma, again, also no surprise, as the Republican Dr. Tom Coburn will return to the Oklahoma Senate seat that he has held previously. Pennsylvania, too close to call at this hour. Not too early, but too close between Representative Sestak and Mr. Toomey in what has been a hammer and tongs race all along for a year. Illinois, too close to call as well in the Senate race between Mr. Janulius and Mark Kirk. Missouri, a different consideration. Too early to call, meaning we simply have not enough information between Ms. Carnahan and Mr. Blunt. Connecticut is too early to call, but this caveat, we can tell you that the Democrat The Attorney General of the state, Mr. Blumenthal, is leading in that race, but it is too early to call it over the businesswoman Linda McMahon. West Virginia, too early to call. No characterization of that one other than Mr. Manchin is ahead, and as you see, with less than 2% in, he's ahead statistically as well. North Carolina, too early to call between the incumbent Senator Burr and Ms. Marshall. And in Georgia, that one is also still too early to call, although the incumbent Senator Isaacson has a big lead with 3% or so in. We can call North Carolina, again, no surprise there, as Senator Richard Burr, the Republican, retains that seat in North Carolina over the Secretary of State, Elaine Marshall. And the actual hard count, a 55-44 split with more than one-third of that vote in. North Carolina, Senator Burr to be Senator-elect. The Attorney General of Connecticut, Dick Blumenthal, the Democrat, is our NBC News projected winner for the Senate from Connecticut in a, again, you're talking about a lot of money going into that. That was against the wrestling promoter Linda McMahon in a campaign that everyone in the metropolitan New York area knew how much money was spent on it because every commercial break, including on the non-commercial stations, they bought time on those. And the early number, less than 1 to 2%, it's 60-39. What our projection is, Mr. Blumenthal will take that seat and retain it for the retiring Chris Dodd. Not a lot of 8:30 p.m. poll closings, but the one that represented on your map stands out in gold. Arkansas, the site of essentially a morality play, I guess, for the state of Arkansas, the Democratic Party, the unions, everybody else. And as of this hour, NBC News can project the outcome of the Arkansas Senate race based on the early results that John Bozeman, the Republican, will defeat the incumbent Senator Blanche Lincoln by a margin yet to be determined. So that's 2 Senate gains for the Republican. Interrupting you to declare a winner in West Virginia, Governor Joe Manchin, according to NBC News, is the projected victor in a very important, pivotal Senate race for the Democrats. Joe Manchin, who tacked right through much of the campaign against a lot of money spent on behalf of and by his Republican opponent, John Racy. At approximately 9 p.m. in the East, polls closed in 13 more states on this midterm 2010. NBC News can now project that the Republicans have won control of the House of Representatives. The NBC News decision desk projecting that when all the votes are counted nationwide, Republicans will hold 236 seats. The Democrats will hold 199 seats in the new House of Representatives. Senate first, the victory there again here for the North Dakota Republican John Hoeven. So that then brings us into the House. Some expected results. Chuck Schumer in the New York Senate. He will return easily, as will his colleague Kirsten Gillibrand, who was the Democratic incumbent as well. In the Kansas Senate race, this will be a Republican victory for Jerry Moran. In South Dakota, we are expecting that since he ran unopposed, John Thune is the winner, not the projection winner. He's it. Nobody voted against him. There wasn't anybody running against him. In Wisconsin, it is too close to call. Not too early, but too close between the incumbent Russ Feingold, for whom Democrats retain hopes, against his Republican challenger Ron Johnson. In Colorado, it is too close to call in the race between the incumbent, the appointee Senator Bennett, and his Republican challenger Mr. Buck. In Louisiana, it is too early to call in the race between the Senator Vitter and Mr. Melanson, the congressman and Democratic challenger there. In Pennsylvania, it is too close to call between Joe Sestak and the Republican Pat Toomey in the race for Arlen Specter's old seat. And in Illinois, it is also too close to call between Alexei Janulius and Mark Kirk. Meanwhile, the official verbiage for Missouri is it is too early to call, with 2% of the vote in, and what is seemingly a big Republican lead. NBC News can call the Louisiana Senate race. No surprise here. Congressman Charlie Melanson being defeated by the incumbent Senator David Vitter, returning to Washington with the actual hard count still at less than 2%. A very strong number there, but the projection is again Vitter to return to the seat.
No.
The NBC News decision desk can now give you a projection on the Senate race in Missouri, and you see it there. The Republican Roy Blunt is the predicted winner. And here are the actual totals to this point, with 14% of the vote in over Robin Carnahan of the famous Missouri political family of the same name, 60-34. In New York, Andrew Cuomo, the Attorney General of the state, son of the former governor, in a projected victory mode at this point over his opponent, Mr. Happy. The Texas governor's race, Rick Perry, the incumbent there, who had some problems in some polling, but obviously not enough to make us hesitate in projecting him as the winner to retain his seat as in the State House in Austin. At 10 p.m. in the East, polls closed in 6 more states. Let's get our results. First in the Senate, NBC News can now project, in no surprise, in Arizona, the return of Senator John McCain to the United States Senate. His toughest battle, obviously, was in the primary against Mr. Hayworth, so that's our projection in Arizona. The decision desk says in Iowa, survey says, Chuck Grassley will return. No surprise there either. Now, the earliest details out of Nevada, it's not going to please you. It's too early to call. It could be too early to call several hours or perhaps days from now. And the same for Utah, where there is a similar, although smaller scale race to the one in Nevada with Mike Lee. Ed Rendell of Pennsylvania, term limited in the seat, the race to succeed him. The NBC News projection is that the Republican Tom Corbett will pick the seat up for the Republican Party over Dan Honorado. We have a result from Wisconsin to project for you in the Senate race there between one of the lions of the Senate, Russ Feingold, and his Republican challenger, Ron Johnson. It has been tight all evening, but NBC News is now projecting that in this race, the incumbent, Russ Feingold, will fall to Republican challenger Ron Johnson, and the vote at nearly 30% in is a 15-point margin for the Republican Ron Johnson. A few seconds before 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 Eastern time, and the poll closings reflect that. California, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. And NBC News is now stating about the California Senate race that it is too early to call, although the incumbent, Barbara Boxer, against whom $11 billion has been spent, has the lead at this point, but it's too early to call. In the Oregon Senate race, Ron Wyden will be returned, according to our NBC projection, in what is not much of a surprise by any stretch of the imagination. Mike Crapo, the Republican in Idaho, will also be going back to Washington. That one already called by NBC News. And in Washington State, too early to call in Patty Murray's race for re-election against Dino Rossi, and no lead announced to that point, at least by our result, to report to you from the California Senate race, where NBC News' decision desk, Dr. Freud, predicts the outcome of this race and forecasts it for Barbara Boxer, the incumbent in the really a lot of money was spent on this campaign for the Senate seat in California that has been hers and is hers once again. Midnight in the East, polls closed in Hawaii, and before you say, well, all right, first off, Hawaii is not there exactly. Also, it's much bigger tonight in terms of the Democrats and the Senate, because let's look at our NBC News projection for the state of Hawaii, which has existed since 1959, and this man has represented it in the Senate since 1962 and will continue to do so. The World War II veteran, Daniel Inouye. The Republicans, let's do that right now. The Senate in Illinois, it was trending into 90 and plus percent in terms of the vote on the board, and now NBC News can project Mark Kirk, the Republican, has defeated his young Democratic challenger, Alexei Giannoulias. One of those envelopes Senator-elect Toomey opened did was enclosed in it a Chamber of Commerce check for $1.7 million. So it was not all $3 at a time. Just to mention that.
It was very sweet and heartwarming.
NBC News is now projecting Harry Reid will hold on to his Senate seat and defeat Sharon Angle, the perhaps embodiment of the Tea Party. That's a governor's race also in Brian Sandoval, the Republican. We have that. Is the Harry Reid data is correct. We just don't have the here it comes. All right. It's not official till you see the computerized picture. And there he is, smiling officially. The incumbent Harry Reid, after one of the great, epic, and crazy senatorial races of our time. staying put.
Yes, we did.